City Republic. We'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. We do have an agenda in the back. If you didn't pick one up, please pick one up. I would like to call our meeting of the City Council to order, and I'm sure David would like to call his order here in just a second. Go ahead if you want to do that.
I'm David Hall. I'm with the 911 Advisory Board, and we're going to call the 911 Advisory Board meeting together with a quorum present for that. And we have this agenda that follows along with what City Council from the City of Republic has. So I'll turn that to Mayor Buckner.
If you would, please rise for an opening prayer and salute the flag if you care to. If you would bow your heads, please. Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the time we get to spend together. Thank you for the individuals that volunteer their time to be servants to the public. Allow us to make the decisions you want us to make and make the right decisions for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you would, pledge the flag to me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to give a brief overview of kind of where we are at this point. A few years ago, we had discussed with 911 Advisory Board about doing a third-party study regarding consolidation of the two services of 911 service, and 911 Advisory Board last year approved that. The cost was split between Republic and the 911 Advisory Board. That study has been, a draft report has been completed, and would like to turn it over now to Chief Hall. I'll let you do the rest, and then we can get started.
Thank you. Whenever we went through this process, I'm going to be very brief because I'm going to turn it over to Greg Matthews. Whenever we did, we pulled together a representative from the 911 Advisory Board. We pulled together a representative from the, actually two representatives from the Advisory Board and one from the City of Republic. We went out on an RFP process through the county, Greene County's purchasing department, and we looked at a number of consultants and got their proposals back. And whenever we got to the end of that, we had all agreed upon the Matrix Consulting Group would be the consultant that we felt was really the proper one to be able to prepare us or to prepare this report or study for us. So we gave them some very specific scope of work on what we're asking them to do, and that was based upon feedback from the Advisory Board, City of Springfield, as well as the Greene City of Republic. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Greg Matthews from the Matrix Consulting Group.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, council members, commissioners, and advisory board members. Audience, thank you very much for coming this evening. My name is Greg Matthews with Matrix Consulting Group. I have about a 20-slide presentation for you that I anticipate will take anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes to present to you, and then subsequent to that, we'll have a question and answer session. Someone mentioned, will we be here till later than 8? And I said, I won't, but I'll be here as long as you need me. So with that, let me go ahead and begin the slide presentation. Let's first talk a little bit about the project presentation agenda. I'll give a project introduction. We'll talk about the initial consolidation study objectives. We'll talk about the primary approaches used in this study, what we call 4 framing elements that drive the findings, conclusions, and recommendations in this study, those element outcomes. We'll talk about 2 scenarios that we provided with respect to consolidation, and then, of course, as I mentioned, the questions period. So with that, now, just as a side note, you'll see in the lower left-hand corner, for those that wish to take copious notes, you can reference the slides for questions later if we need to go back to a slide. So this is slide number 2, as you can see. So as the mayor pointed out, back in 2010, the 911 Advisory Board voted to consolidate both the Republic and Springfield Greene dispatch centers based on prior studies and input that they had conducted. Later on, within the past 6 to 8 months, the 911 Advisory Board, in partnership with Republic, then desired to conduct a final independent consolidation assessment, and as David suggested, they hired Matrix Consulting Group, which is us. Now, what were those 4 primary objectives that the 911 Advisory Board wanted to accomplish during this project review. And the four are listed here in this slide, and forgive me, I'm just going to read this one to you. I typically don't read slides, but this one I will. What is the impact on overall public safety and dispatch service levels as a result of various consolidation options? What are the potential cost savings as a result of consolidation? What is the best way to provide dispatch service backup and redundancy? And does consolidation in Greene County overall make sense as part of a long-range approach? To give you a little bit of background on the project team and project coordinators in this engagement, the Matrix Consulting Group, there were two of us on the engagement, one primarily hidden who did quality assurance and quality control on the projects. His name is Richard Brady. He's the president of our firm located in Palo Alto, California, and he has over 30 years of experience in public safety, public works, and public utilities. He did the quality assurance, quality control on this. My name is Greg Matthews, as I mentioned at the introduction of the study. My background began in the mid-1980s at the City of Pasadena Police Department, where I was a non-sworn manager initially and then enjoyed the work so much that I went sworn. I ended up working both field patrol, vice narcotics, and air support. And after 7 years, my first wife made me leave the profession. She didn't think flying a helicopter was safe for one reason or another, so I did, in fact, leave. I went on to public works and public utilities later in my career and finished my career as Deputy Director of Auditing for the City of Los Angeles, where I operated a performance auditing division, and we audited the 44 departments in L.A. Then I had the good fortune of moving to the Pacific Northwest in 2005 and have been with Matrix Consulting since that time. Both David Hall, as you know, and Jim from the City of Republic acted as the project coordinators on this engagement. They're both from the 911 Advisory Board, and of course Jim is the City Administrator of Republic, and they basically helped facilitate the study and ensure it progressed appropriately. Slide 4. Let me talk a little bit about what were the primary approaches that we used to conduct this study. The first thing that we do in any kind of engagement like this is we conduct interviews. And we interviewed numerous people on a one-on-one basis. We did a couple of small focus groups, but overall we interviewed 35 people on a one-on-one or small focus group basis. Those included city executives, members of city council, commissioners, members of the dispatch team, technical staff, advisory board members, a number essentially of stakeholders throughout these communities. We developed an anonymous survey instrument that we distributed to all dispatch staff in both dispatch agencies. We had a very good response rate in that 73% of the people chose to respond to our questionnaire, and that solicited feedback and opinions from those staff. We collected a variety of data from both agencies. The data was very comprehensive. Our data collection list was quite exhaustive, and both the dispatch agencies were quite supportive and timely in getting us that information. We had regular contact with both Jim and David during the engagement, who oversaw the project. And then we developed these interim deliverables, and we prepared the draft report. An interim deliverable, by example, was a profile document that reflected our understanding of operations at the two dispatch centers. Those were corrected by staff, fed back to us, and then ultimately preparation of a draft report. This presentation I'm giving you tonight is based on that draft report findings, conclusions, and recommendations. Let me talk about something that's very important to our process of analysis at Matrix Consulting Group. We have 4 what we call framing elements, others could call them guiding principles, for consolidation initiatives. And these are those 4 elements or foundational and analytical approaches by which we conduct these kinds of studies. Item number 1, it is crucial to minimize delays in public safety service response for effective service delivery to the community. Number 2, highly trained professional dispatchers employing consistent protocols are the ideal solution to effective public safety service delivery. Item number 3, In an era of government fiscal constraint, taxpayers deserve highly effective dispatch services at the most reasonable cost. In item number 4, operational changes from any consolidation or alternative dispatch service delivery initiative should have a net operational benefit to public safety services overall. What that essentially means is you can certainly consolidate dispatch services, and it's being conducted throughout the country. But ideally, you might gain benefits from consolidation, but you might lose advantages elsewhere in the public safety arena. By example, you don't want to lose police proactive time as a consequence of dispatch consolidation. So you want to make sure that there is a net operational benefit in public safety overall to the communities that you're serving. Slide number 6. This is basically the findings and conclusions as a result of looking at the study from element number 1, minimizing delays to the community. What does that exactly mean? What does minimize delays to the community mean? Basically, that's a discussion of response time. And as most of you know, response time is from your perspective as a telephone caller to a public safety agency. How long does it take for the fire department to get to my house if I'm calling an emergency? How long does it take the law enforcement person, the officer or deputy, to get to my house in an emergency? The definition of response time is, generally speaking, for most agencies throughout the United States, I pick up the phone, response time starts, the officer arrives at my house, response time ends. What is that time frame that occurred between those two periods of time? So public safety response time is measured from the caller's perspective. In the highest priority calls, and in dispatch agencies throughout the country, they prioritize calls for service. High priority calls, the highest priority of fire is involved. An officer is down. A felony is in progress. We have an emergency medical situation. Those are the highest priority calls, and you want your response time as low as possible in those particular situations. So response time counts in those high priority situations, but dispatch's impact on that response time is typically relatively minor and should be minor. The primary response time driver in high priority calls is actually travel time to the incident. That's how long it takes the fire department to deploy and get to your home, the police officers to transfer across their beat and get to the place of business. So it's important to recognize that although this is an important element, minimizing delays to the community, at least with respect to high priority calls, dispatch generally should play a relatively minor role. So what are the outcomes of looking at element 1 from a dispatch perspective? Minimizing delays for average time to dispatch of a high priority call. Here are the results for the 2 dispatch agencies based on the data that we collected. These are the average times from call receipt to the people actually dispatching the call out. In other words, Dispatcher Matthews answers the telephone, and Officer Jim is now dispatched out. For Republic, Priority 1 fire medical calls, basically 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Springfield, Greene County, 1 minute and 33 seconds. I'll let you read the rest of the differences and results there. In general, when you compare Republic and Springfield, Greene County, there's a dispatch time difference from the telephone call receipt to a public safety unit being deployed of an average of 41 seconds, with the advantage going to Springfield, Greene. That's element number 1. Keep that in mind as we go forward in the presentation. That's one method by which we evaluate the findings, conclusions, and recommendations related to consolidation. Element number 2, highly trained professional dispatchers are ideal. Highly trained and knowledgeable dispatchers are of significant benefit to any community they serve. Dispatcher staff generally come in two varieties. There is a third I'll talk about briefly. But consider this. Throughout the United States, dispatchers are either specialists or dispatchers are generalists. The specialist dispatchers are those folks that focus nearly exclusively on performing dispatch duties and responsibilities, answering telephone calls, dispatching units, responding to police officer inquiries in the field. Those are specialists. You could describe the Springfield Greene County dispatch operation as a specialist-based organization. Then there are dispatch generalists. Those are the dispatchers throughout the United States that generally operate in smaller dispatch agencies. They're trained to perform multiple duties and responsibilities in addition to dispatch services to serve the public safety needs of a community. By example, dispatchers will service a front counter. Dispatchers will monitor public safety, public works, pumping stations, and alarms. Those kinds of dispatchers in smaller public safety entities are typically the generalist public safety dispatcher. I mentioned there's a third. It's not located on the slide, but there is a third kind of dispatcher, and I don't mean to use the term unprofessional dispatcher, but I think it's reflective of what does go on throughout the United States in many, many small police departments, in small fire departments, etc. And that's police staff, such as a police officer, a fire reserve professional, etc., perform dispatch functions for their particular agency. Their primary function is not dispatching. It is truly an ancillary duty for them. They do it on the side because they're so small, they don't have the resources to have professional dispatchers. There are, quite frankly, a lot of small agencies throughout the U.S. that operate in that fashion. But generally speaking, when you're talking about dispatchers, you're talking about dispatchers, specialists and generalists, such as Greene, Springfield, and Republic. Element number 3, taxpayers deserve effective dispatch at the most reasonable cost. I think we could probably all agree to that, particularly in these economic times, that that is critical. When any community considers consolidation opportunities, beyond the service level changes, cost savings are often a driving force behind a consolidation initiative. People are looking to try to reduce costs in any manner feasible. Consolidation is often discussed both from a service level perspective and a cost savings perspective. Taxpayers deserve an effective and efficient dispatch operation with both primary and backup capabilities. We'll talk a little bit more about backup later in the presentation, but as a taxpayer, although for most citizens, dispatch isn't visible at all. You only need it when you call. For the vast majority of citizens, there is no discussion of backup, but there is an expectation when I call, someone will answer the phone, irrespective of what's going on out in the field, whether a tornado has hit or something like that. There is an expectation, as you all know, that someone's picking up the phone. The cost of any dispatch operation are linked to several factors, and I imagine almost every one of you in here are businesswomen or businessmen, and like most public or private sector agencies or businesses, the bulk of the costs of a dispatch agency are linked to the personnel costs. That's pretty common, irrespective of the business. So with regard to element 3, and looking at dispatch as what is the most reasonable cost, we basically look at the operational costs of various facilities. And what we do is we look at the personnel of those facilities and try to determine what level of personnel do you need in an organization to appropriately run the business. Now, in dispatch services, there's a couple of different ways to look at what personnel you need and ultimately what cost that will require. One of the ways that we look, and the predominant way that we look at dispatch personnel needs and related costs, is basically looking at the workload requirements for those positions. What drives workload for dispatch agencies? Predominantly calls for service from the community and all those tasks related to answering that call for service, processing that call for service, etc. That is a workload-based approach to developing personnel. There is also another approach used for evaluating personnel, and that is called cover position evaluation, or in nomenclature with many police departments, fixed post staffing requirements. Irrespective of how much workload I have, if you have one position you need to fill 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days, whether I have one call, whether I have 10 calls, whether I have 100 calls, that's called a cover position evaluation. On average, I'm giving you an average, it takes 5 1/4 full-time equivalents or 5 1/4 people to cover one 24/7, 365-day operation. So if you have 2 dispatch consoles and you must, for whatever reasons, cover those 2 dispatch consoles with 2 people 24/7, you need about 10 1/2 people. So we did these analyses in our study related to dispatcher workload requirements. And we did focus essentially on the workload requirement element of this staffing engagement. Based on workload modeling, staffing levels in Springfield and Greene would only need to be increased by 2 dispatcher staff to handle Republic's dispatcher-based specialist workload. That's their calls for service workload. That doesn't mean they can handle all the additional duties and responsibilities that the generalist dispatchers do in Republic, but you only need 2 additional people to handle the fire and police-related calls for service workload. Given that, you can save an estimated $285,000 annually in deferred personnel costs by some form of dispatch consolidation solution. What would occur in that particular instance is basically the current Republic dispatcher staff that are city employees of Republic would go away. And under some type of consolidated alternative, you would hire 2 additional dispatch staff at Springfield Greene. That's the analysis, or the basis of the analysis, for element number 3. Element number 4. A consolidation effort should result in a net operational benefit to the public safety overall. Now, when I refer to Greene County here, I'm referring to Greene County as an entire entity, not Greene County as a government entity, not the City of Republic, not the City of Springfield, all members of Greene County, regardless of where they may live. With respect to element 4, there is no strong evidence to suggest dispatch operational effectiveness will measurably improve from consolidation beyond modest improvements in response time. Both the dispatchers in Republic and the dispatchers in Greene County, Springfield, are professional dispatchers. They both operate very effectively in their given duties and responsibilities. So with respect to dispatch service delivery, you might anticipate a modest improvement in response time. Prior slide, we were talking 40-some-odd seconds improvement when you compare Springfield, Greene County versus Republic. You will have a notable cost savings from consolidation, $285,000 annually based on deferred personnel costs. However, it must be noted, and it's very important to recognize, that overall public safety services in the City of Republic will basically decline as a result of losing their dispatcher generalists. If staff go away from that facility, certain things will occur unless those things are mitigated. What kinds of things will occur if personnel leave the Republic dispatch facility? The Republic Police Department facility will have to close and lock its doors during non-business hours. Presently, it's operated 24/7. Many police departments throughout the United States close during business hours. Many police departments do not and prefer to stay open on a 24/7 basis. The Republic Jail Holding Facility cannot be used, as detainees will have to be moved elsewhere, removing Republic Police Department officers from the field for a much longer period of time. Now, this wouldn't be so problematic in large cities like Springfield or where I came from in Pasadena if I had to go to the city of Los Angeles, by the way, on a medical case due to jail. But when you're in a small police department like Republic Police Department, and you lose one officer in the field, that can be a dramatic public safety and service issue. If you're only deploying 3 or 4 officers in the field, losing one for a significant period of time has a measurable impact. Republic, the fire department, may, it's not definitive, but may lose their automatic capability of facility shutdown. Right now they have technologies employed where dispatch can shut down their facility completely, close the doors, turn off the lights, turn off the stoves, all of that, and the fire department deploys. They may lose that capability. And there are other service level issues of importance. During the course of the engagement, I asked, just by example, the Republic Police Chief to list some of the issues that would occur as a result of people leaving the facility, having no dispatch staff at the facility. In just a day, he was able to come up with 38 items that needed to be addressed as a consequence of losing staff. Consequently, as a result of this analysis, there is a net loss of public safety services to Republic, and by association, all of Greene County. And that needs to be considered, unless these particular shortcomings are addressed in some fashion. So let's go back to the project objectives that we talked about at the outset of the study. There were 4 of them. Number 1, does consolidation in Greene County make sense? The answer is yes. Some form of dispatch consolidation does make sense in Greene County. We propose 2 scenarios for consideration by the community, by the advisory board, etc. Scenario 1, consolidation of all law enforcement and fire call receipt and dispatch services in Springfield, Greene County's 911 Emergency Communications new facility. This is the result of several kinds of studies you've already had in the past. Scenario 2, consolidate operations under a Springfield, Greene County 911 Emergency Communications, hire 2 additional staff at Springfield, Greene County, but deploy those staff related to countywide fire dispatching, which would in this instance include Republic, deploy those dispatchers at the Republic facility. So we have scenario 1, scenario 2. Scenario 1 is based on a full consolidation approach at one facility. Scenario 2 is based on something called a virtual consolidation, where you have an operation under one agency, but you deploy those folks at 2 or more different facilities, and that is scenario 2. Slide 15. Another project objective. What are potential consolidation cost savings? We've talked about that. Based on the data we collected under a Springfield Greene County consolidation scenario, staff savings are approximately $285,000 annually due to the overall staffing reductions of dispatcher staff in the communities. In the short term, these costs would be partially offset by expenses associated with developing a backup center with appropriate technological redundancies. So in the very short term, you would offset those costs due to technologies, but in the longer term and the midterm, those costs would be offset. Project objective. What is the best way to provide dispatch service backup and redundancy? During this interview process that I mentioned at the outset of the engagement, there was near universal consensus, not 100%, but near universal consensus among all interviewees that a backup dispatch center with appropriate redundancy was desired, despite the fact Springfield Greene County dispatch operations will have a new state-of-the-art facility. Everyone in the Greene County community, with a few exceptions, at least those that were interviewed, believed that a backup center with redundancy capability was important. A backup dispatch option with redundant systems and immediate availability is consistent with best practice standards in the profession. In other words, if you want a best practice backup center, you want one that has redundant systems, basically equivalent to the original dispatch center. You want one that has capability to perform like the primary dispatch center, and you want it to be live as soon as possible in case of a natural disaster, a major event, etc. This kind of finding is one critical driver in our Matrix Consulting Group selecting Consolidation Scenario 2 as the preferred option over Scenario 1. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Project objective. What is the impact on overall public safety and dispatch service levels as a result of consolidation? Consolidation should result in minor dispatch operational improvements at a notably reduced cost. We talked about that earlier in the study. Overall, public safety services will decline if on-site dispatch staff are lost, whoever they report to. If there are no bodies at the Republic Police Department and Backup Center, they will lose certain levels of service. One way or another, this will have to be mitigated. Addressing Republic's public safety service decline is another critical driver in our selecting Consolidation Scenario 2 as the preferred option. So let's talk about selection of Scenario 2. And as a reminder, what was Scenario 2? Consolidate operations under Springfield Greene County 911 Emergency Communications, hire 2 additional dispatcher staff at Springfield Greene, and fully staff a county-wide fire dispatch operation at the Republic Dispatch Facility. What does Scenario 2 do? It addresses a best practice backup center concept of effective, knowledgeable, and rapidly available dispatchers using redundant equipment. Is this the only way backup centers are deployed throughout the United States? Absolutely not. Is it a best in-class approach? It absolutely is. What was our project objective based on the scope of work? What is the best way to develop a backup center with redundant systems? Scenario 2 will address many, though not all, of Republic's public safety issues that would arise through a loss of on-site personnel. Continuing with the selection of Scenario 2, we believe that the potential shortcomings of Scenario 2 can largely be overcome through straightforward technology initiatives. Straightforward, of course, is in the eye of the beholder. If you ask IT people, some will say it's very straightforward, some will say not at all. But overall, we believe it's straightforward, and advanced planning. And a very key point here, I personally think this is a critical point in this particular study. If all the Greene County communities discover that a Scenario 2 does not work, it's not meeting the needs of all Greene County, it has unintended consequences, or it's suffering some kind of irreconcilable difficulties, you can relatively smoothly transition back to a Scenario 1. Remember, the Scenario 1 is a full consolidation at the new state-of-the-art dispatch facility. You cannot go in the reverse direction very easily. If it were chosen to go with Scenario 1, it is extremely difficult to go to Scenario 2. The reason being is Republic will have to address their issues. And they will address their issues one way or the other. And by the time a decision would be made, you know what, maybe we should have implemented Scenario 2, many of those issues will have already been resolved. So what are the next steps for both us and for all of you? Number 1, finalize the draft report and deliver to the 911 Advisory Board per our contract. Number 2, the 911 Advisory Board at some point will select Consolidation Scenario 1 or Scenario 2 for implementation and move forward. Item number 3, this is critically important. It ranks up there with the same observation I made to you, personal observation on Scenario 1 versus Scenario 2. Based upon the scenario selected, irrespective of which one is chosen, or some other option that you choose, you must develop a formal and written transition plan to address the transition issues and identify potential options to resolve or address these issues. Develop a transition team to include various stakeholders throughout the Greene County community to develop this plan. I want to read something to you, just 3 or 4 sentences, because I think it highlights the importance of this. The Department of Transportation, with respect to development of next-generation 911 systems, developed their own formal transition plan and had this in the introduction. It is critical to understand and assess transition issues and identify potential options to address or resolve these issues. Without the understanding of these issues, deployment may extend over an inordinate length of time. Again, as a reminder, this is the Federal Department of Transportation when they developed a formal transition plan for their next generation 911. Include in the transition plan detailed plans and necessary technologies to ensure dispatch backup is readily available. And then finally, monitor transition progress, adjust policies, procedures, protocols, and transition plans accordingly based on the developments that you discover during implementation of either Scenario 2 or Scenario 1. That's the conclusion of my formal presentation. A couple of house cleaning items here. The draft report will probably be finalized in the next 2 weeks. That report is over 110 pages long. So for details, I invite you to read that report once it becomes available. Secondly, up here I have my business cards. I'll be happy to talk to any of you on an individual basis. Just give me a telephone call or send me an email, and I'll be happy to answer your questions related to the study or the presentation. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have, and I'll just take hands. And I'll let the mayor point out who's first and who's second and what have you.
You mentioned that if we do option 2, that Republic would handle fire calls. This may be a dumb question, but when you pick up the phone and you dial 911, the phone system and computers don't know if you have a fire or what you have. So do you have an automated system that says press 1 if you have a fire, or do you say please hold and you transfer it to Republic?
What you just said, the latter option is what happens throughout the United States when you have those certain situations. You have the call taker take the call at a primary public safety answering point. They pick up the phone, they say, what is your emergency or some similar issue, and the caller says, I have a medical emergency. That phone call is then taken and hooked up with fire dispatchers at another agency. They get on the line, and the call is taken. This happens throughout the United States where there is different call takers or separate police and fire dispatch agencies where they coordinate services technologically. By example, we're doing a study right now at Chula Vista Police Department. Chula Vista Police Department is near San Diego. They have their own public safety dispatch operation for police only, but they're the primary safety answering point. All calls come into that. The call taker takes it, listens, and then transfers calls accordingly to the county fire dispatch agency for transmission and handling.
Does that add an additional amount of time that's negligible, or does that impact the time, response time, especially for a fire?
Generally speaking, it is negligible. It depends on a few things. One, the technology employed to make the transference. Number 2, the policies and procedures that you employ to handle that particular call. And number 3, the training of the personnel that are involved in handling that particular call. So typically speaking, it is negligible. It's working throughout the United States in a variety of agencies, hundreds, thousands of different agencies. So there's standard procedures that are employed to handle these. But if any of one of those 3 particular areas there's failures in technology and personnel and policies and procedures, the time will go up, and there will, as a consequence, be an impact on fire response time. By the way, my agent charges extra for filming me.
I got a question on, can't hear? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine.
Okay.
It's the people 500 yards in the back that probably can't hear you.
Okay. When you talked about the lag time with the Republic Dispatch Center,
Yes.
Is that because the dispatchers handle additional duties other than just the 911 calls, that they're doing other duties? Is that what did you find as the reason?
I cannot diagnose for you the reason. I don't know the reason. I would suspect, based on my experience, that answer is no. That it is not because they are involved in other what you might call administrative or generalist duties and responsibilities. It might be a function of just that particular year. Looking at a different year, the results could have been different. So I don't really know the precise answer. If this were an operational study of each dispatch center and a staffing study, we would have delved more deeply into the reasons behind that. So I can't tell you definitively, yes, that's the reason, but my suspicion is no, it's not related to them being generalist dispatchers.
Okay, and then another one on Slide 13, Public Safety Services. You talked about Republic having detainees in their jail. How many detainees do they average have?
I'm going to defer to the chief on that one. There you are. I'm sorry.
About 2.5 to 3 hours of transport time, depending on what goes on, that officer's not available for other calls.
Okay, and then one final thing, the list of 38 items that the police chief identified, will that be in your final report?
It can be in the final report. I would offer this, if that is in the final report, then we should put all other kinds of potential issues in the report, and then this starts becoming the beginnings of a transition plan. Those items that you're referencing, the 38 items that need to be addressed, really are the types of things that should be addressed in a transition plan. In other words, if, let's say, for sake of argument, you decide to go to scenario 1, we're going to consolidate everything at Springfield Green. You still need to address many of these points, irrespective of the solution you have chosen. How will you handle, by example, the fire department's, the Republic Fire Department's automatic closure of their facility? Will that be a technologically based solution? Will you not do it for them and they will have to abandon that technology? So, yes, we can put it in the report if the board, such as, and you are on the board, and the project coordinators, David and Jim, wish us to, but I would caution you that it's only a snapshot for Republic Police Department. It doesn't include all the transition issues that you must face, including those ones that go beyond consolidation. The fact that you are moving to a brand new facility, the fact that you are going to be implementing a new revised edition of computer-aided dispatch really suggests that you should have a transition plan. Let me just give you a little story, if I may. I mentioned we work for Chula Vista Police Department. All right? At Chula Vista Police Department, they recently implemented a new computer system called NetRMS, Net Records Management System. All right? What that essentially is, it allows police officers to file reports online in a standard format, do it remotely from their police car, from their mobile data computers, etc. Based on our interviews, 9 out of 10 police officers, agents, sergeants, and lieutenants think it's a complete failure for a variety of reasons. I went to the project manager of the engagement. I said, where's your NetRMS implementation or transition plan? What NetRMS transition or implementation plan? You don't have an implementation plan, how you wanted to implement these new technologies to make sure it was consistent with your policies and procedures and practice? Are you having software essentially drive how you do business, or is it the opposite way? They didn't have an answer. They didn't have a transition plan. Without a transition plan, when you're doing major initiatives, you will run into these kinds of failures, I have no doubt. So the bottom line is, long-winded answer, This list from the chief, yes, in a transition plan it should be included. Fire department at Republic should be included. Any other things related to moving from a new facility to a brand new facility should be included in that transition plan.
Okay, I would make a request that since you brought it up in the presentation, that the 38
sure
be listed in the report. And then just to follow up, maybe back to the chief again, on the detainees, are they detained, like how many are in there tonight? And I'm talking about after business hours. Do you detain anybody after hours?
We arrest people on warrants, or right as I was pulling in here, they were in a domestic dispute that was physical, so there's a likelihood somebody will be arrested off of that. They'll be brought back to the station and booked, and then depending on what occurs after that, they'll either be transported to the county jail or elsewhere. So we run a 24-hour, 7-day. We're the only other booking room detention facility in Greene County other than the Sheriff's Department.
Okay, thanks.
You were comparing scenario 1 and scenario 2 and said there was the $285,000 savings.
Right.
Either way.
Correct.
Is there operational expenses to scenario 2 that do not apply to scenario 1 for keeping the second center open?
None that I can definitively identify as accurately as the staff savings. One thing, by example, that you get at Republic Dispatch Center is you get a facility for free as a backup facility center. They could, at some point, choose to start charging you for such services. That would then be a reduction in net savings. I don't believe that's going to happen. That's currently not the existing philosophy, but if the present city council goes away and the city administrator goes away, that potential cost would be added on as an additional cost to operations. There are some additional startup costs. The phone system will have to be upgraded over at Republic if you were to implement scenario 2, and I think that, David, was somewhere around $660. What was it? Depended upon the way you did it. Right. But overall, once you have the initial technological systems in place, there should not be any type of operational expense and or savings other than the staff. You might have some 911 line, trunk line costs and things like that, but they're $10,000 or something like that. Yeah. The primary savings is going to be related to costs, and as far as costs on the other side for keeping it open, we believe it's particularly in the mid and long term.
And then this is more of a law enforcement question because I don't understand the booking process, but if when Republic leaves to take someone to the Greene County Jail, how does that compare? I live in Willard. When they leave to take someone, are they out of service then for the whole city? Is there a difference there with other cities for you?
I'm not familiar with what their procedures are. I have no. I don't have the ability to make an informed response to that.
I guess I'm looking for a difference between other area municipalities and Republic as far as having to leave the city with detainees.
Well, again, that largely depends. The real, we think the broader issue is this. This was evaluated in the context as would you lose overall public safety services in the county? Chief, do you get detainees from other cities? Do they bring them to your jail operation, or do they all take them to the county? The others normally too. So you're not some type of holding facility for okay. So the bottom line, they're already experiencing that. That's already an outcome for them. There's no net benefit or loss because they're already doing that. Okay? For Republic, that wouldn't be the case. There would be a net loss in police proactive time as a consequence of them transporting people to the county as opposed to using their own holding facility.
And then my last question, your third objective at the very beginning was to identify the best backup option.
Correct.
What other options were considered as a backup?
Only the best one. We were asked to do the best one, not other. There are clearly other options. If there was one right answer, everybody would be doing it the same way, and we'd be out of business. There's not one right answer. But let me give you some examples.
There has to be a comparison.
Yeah, let me give you some examples of what you could do. You could use backup services with Christian County, by example. They just recently consolidated, as you're probably familiar, and you could have them back up your operation. What are the disadvantages of Christian County doing a backup. Not only Christian County, what are the disadvantages in the United States? Although it's relatively common for another city, another county, an adjoining county, another agency to provide backup services for another entity, what are the disadvantages? The disadvantages from our perspective are very clear. Those dispatchers that are providing backup that operate in a different entity have no idea about your community. They have no knowledge, generally speaking, with respect to where's your middle school, where are your hospitals, where's your wastewater treatment plant, where's your water operation, where are your fire stations? They don't know. They don't know. That's why we believe a best-in-class operation is to have a backup center with dispatchers that are in the know. Let me give you an example. Perhaps some will find it silly. I think it's a good example. If you and I take a trip together, and forgive me, you probably know a little bit about aircraft. Let's say you and I are going to go on a trip in Southwest Airlines on a 737, and we're going across country and we're at 30,000 feet. And a major mechanical failure occurs on that aircraft, and you have three pilots available. You have the pilot of the 737, you have the co-pilot of the 737, and you just happen to have a passenger in the back that flies 747 aircraft. Who do you want handling that aircraft in that emergency situation? Who do you want? The 737 pilot or co-pilot? Pilot or who's the last person you want of those three? The 747 passenger. Yes, he's a trained pilot. Absolutely, that's better than Greg Matthews flying the aircraft and trying to land it in a mechanical situation. But that's your last choice, because you want your best, brightest, most informed, and knowledgeable people operating your dispatch agency in an emergency situation. That's why police departments have SWAT. That's why fire departments have hazmat teams. They have specialized teams to handle things in an emergent situation. If a tornado hits, you want your dispatchers immediately available who knows this community in an ideal best practice situation. You don't want Christian County handling that. I don't think it's an option, but I don't think that's the choice you would want. At least that's our position, and that's why we recommended scenario 2.
Greg, I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, please.
Is Christian County's been tossed around as the backup facility of choice potentially under scenario 1. We're getting ready to make a hardware and software upgrade associated with the new PSE. Is Christian County running the same hardware and software?
No, I don't believe so. But there's people more informed than me. I think they have digital radio systems. So.
Talk to Iowa.
And if I may, just really quickly, let me follow up on that, because you bring up a very good point. You know, one thing that Republic and Green Springfield has a tremendous advantage over many, many other agencies throughout the United States. You also already have the fundamental technologies in place to make this transition relatively easily. You are using the same CAD system. The CAD data that I got for this study came from the CAD system from Springfield Green and was validated from the data provided by Republic. It's already there. Most agencies don't have that benefit already in place.
Okay, Greg, since I got the mic, I'll go ahead with some of my questions. The sheriff and I had very similar questions, and I appreciate you asking those, so it lets me move on to slightly different. In the event, for whatever, we spend a lot of time, and Ryan's one of the best in the country probably at thinking about these stuff, and some of the things he thinks about quite honestly scares the bejesus out of me. But in the event that the new facility, for whatever reason, goes down, we talk about the smoothness of that transition of who's going to pick up. They talk about the rolling over to any 7-digit number, rolling over to Christian County. I've heard those things all tossed around. The question is, who physically makes that happen, and where does it go, and what is the current plan for where it goes and who it goes to?
Anybody want to? Okay. David?
Okay, that's a multifaceted question. Okay. Let's start with the basics, the 911 phone calls. If all our 911 trucks are busy, they currently roll to the Republic Dispatch Center. If there should be a situation in which our center becomes uninhabitable, we place a call to AT&T, who's our incumbent local exchange carrier, our telephone company, and tell them to route those calls. We can tell them to route it to another PSAP. We could tell them to route it to Republic. We could tell them, as we did when we had a cable cut, to route them to our 10-digit administrative lines because it was an issue with our 911 trucks. It depends upon the level of failure.
And there's where, and again, this is where Ryan scares the bejesus out of me all the time. It's the worst case scenario that you've always got to be prepared for. The F5 tornado that strolled through Joplin, Missouri might someday do a different one, but might decide to stroll through the government complex of downtown Springfield. Even though that building is designed to sustain all kinds of impacts, you just can't tell what happens. In this scenario, the worst case scenario that I'm referring to here, and believe me, 99.9% of the time, the new PSC is going to perform beautifully, never even hiccup. It's that one little hiccup that's going to have us all scrambling, and I want to be prepared for it. So you're talking about somebody, a physical person, has to make a phone call to AT&T, who has to be there to answer the call and then physically make that route. I'm talking about a scenario, a doomsday scenario, where these individuals are not capable of making that call. What kind of automatic rollover systems do we have?
AT&T has a 24/7 resolution center that monitors the 911 circuits going to every PSAP that they provide service for. Many times they will notice a problem with a line at or before any of that happens. We have contingency plans in place right now that will route those calls to Republic.
Okay, and then how long was, I'm sorry, folks, indulge me here, how long was the delay from the time that the trunk line that was cut a while back to the time that Republic started receiving those calls? What kind of downtime did we have?
I believe that was very minimal, if any. We pretty quickly routed them back to our admin lines and had no issues there. It wasn't an issue, that particular issue was not an issue with all of them at once. Quite frankly, someone installing wayfaring signs in Springfield drilled through about 10,000 pairs of cable.
I would not have wanted to get that filled. Okay, let me change the direction here just a little bit, and this will be for Greg. In your line of questioning, with the survey that you mentioned that the 911 employees took,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What kind of questions were asked, and is your report going to have the results of that survey?
The report does have the results of that survey right now. A variety of different kinds of questions were asked, ranging from your opinion on consolidation, should it be consolidated, will you lose service levels in Republic if you consolidate, what's the best approach to consolidation, are you technologically capable of consolidation, what are your primary issues related to a consolidated initiative if it would occur. There's about 30-some-odd questions in that survey, and that's a distinct chapter in the report. There were commonalities between the two dispatch centers as far as opinions, and there was also some distinct differences. And it was a very interesting and enlightening reading. And any survey is important to us because it helps us, do further analysis or independent analysis, but certainly they're all worth reading, and it's important to get the feedback of the people that are going to be predominantly impacted. So that will be in the final report as well.
I got one last question, and I'll give the microphone to someone else. In your look at this, it's a Greene County, county-wide tax that funds this whole thing. The new PSC is our building, for lack of a better term, even though it's shared with the city of Springfield. The employees for 911 are Springfield City employees. Did you look at, in this whole consolidation view, to make those county employees instead of city employees?
Did not. No, we did not look on whether or not those should be in a different government organization unit. Thank you. There's a gentleman behind you.
So following up on Jim's question, if the call center, if all the calls are routed, everything's consolidated to the new PSC, what happens then, doomsday scenario, what happens to all those calls? Where do they get routed at that point? Where do we go from there if nobody can take calls at the PSC?
They could go to almost any comm center. We've had initial conversations with Christian County to send the calls there. Basically, it's almost a standard within the 911 industry that any county that has issues, any other county will chip in and help. We regularly get overflow calls from Polk County. It happens all the time. Again, those are contingency plans that are made. Currently, right now, the plan is Republic. We can change that plan and make it Christian County. Our thought to the advantage of Christian County is, again, we're kind of on an island just simply because of the volume of calls that we get compared to any other agency that surrounds us. The volume of 911 calls. We get anywhere from 600 to 900 911 calls a day. The only agency that surrounds us that even approaches that is Christian County. Would they be overwhelmed? Would they have all they can handle? Sure, just as anybody would. We talked a little bit a while ago about the tornado in Joplin. Luckily, very fortunately, the Jasper County 911 Center was not hit, nor was the City of Joplin's 911 Center. But because of the issues with the network and the phone connectivity to that area, several of those calls ended up in Newton County. Several of those calls we received them here in Greene County. Because the catastrophic failure wasn't necessarily in the center and the center go down, but the network to deliver all those calls. Even your wireless cell phone calls, yeah, you're talking to a tower, but those towers have to be connected back to the public switch telephone network, your regular wireline phones. They've got to either get there by microwave or fiber optics or some version. One of the wireless companies had their entire mobile switching center in Joplin blown away. They didn't get that back up and running for a month or two. And in the meantime, we got several calls from there.
But suppose you have an earthquake, terrorist attack, tornado, whatever the case may be. Given that we are the biggest population base in this part of the state, can those rural counties, even if those calls are rolled over, can those rural counties possibly handle that volume? Honestly,
it's going to be very difficult for them, and that's why we thought about Christian County, because they do have more people working at one time and a bigger center than any of the rest. That's if the Republic Center goes away, it would probably have to be split out. Maybe by central office. The prefixes in the north part of the county, maybe they get shipped to Polk County. Maybe some of them get shipped to Webster County, and we have to have a central point where those agencies can relay that information back to us via radio.
One last question. Do we have the infrastructure in place, or would all those counties have the infrastructure in place to make sure that they can coordinate with all the emergency agencies in the event that happen? I mean, if you've got calls going to Polk County or Christian County, are they going to be able to effectively communicate with emergency services?
Yeah, and remember, this would be on a short-term basis. We've identified through Ryan's help several local facilities in Greene County that we could roll back to in the case of that catastrophic failure. Several years ago, we had grants that allowed us to purchase a radio on our radio system and place in the PSAP of every county that surrounds Greene. There are other radio networks available. There are assets available from the state of Missouri and from FEMA. I was in Joplin Sunday night, and by Monday morning, we had many FEMA trucks, comm vehicles there, specifically set up to try to help with those kind of things. As we said, we were very fortunate in their 911 centers didn't get blown away, but the network to be able to call them from anybody was obviously very seriously hindered.
I want to address something real quick. JR, you said you could roll it to Christian County, you can roll it these, and you're looking at hardened facilities around the area that would be able to accommodate. You have a hardened facility here, already up and running, with the technology already in it. I guess I don't quite understand the 911 advisory board's will to move that, to go to another hardened facility, to look at other facilities when you already have one here. I still don't understand quite the reasoning behind that. And I guess that's the question I have, is that we have a facility here. You talked about looking at ones. You talked about looking at, I know you're going to address this, but there's already one in place. The infrastructure's in place. The scenario says that I guess don't quite understand of looking for further facilities outside what we already have in place that a lot of areas around the country don't have.
Yeah, that's... Yeah.
Looking at scenario number one, you're saying we'd save $285,000. I'm a taxpayer, and I'd like to have the safety of having two locations in case we have a scenario like we had at Joplin, and I think $285,000 is not enough.
Just for clarification, you're going to save $285,000 in scenario 1 or scenario 2. The reason being, and this is one of the downsides of our profession, is you would basically eliminate the Republic dispatcher staff, who are City of Republic employees, 7 dispatchers and 1 supervisor. And what you would do is you take Greene County, Springfield dispatchers, add 2 to their staff base, and deploy those staff over here. So you have a net savings of 6 positions, which is equivalent to $285,000.
I guess, Greg, many people, the something I haven't heard come up here in talking about backup systems is, in that doomsday scenario, is Republic capable of handling a backup, or do they just have 1 dispatcher on and a call taker versus Christian County maybe having 10? Was that took into play there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What the scenario 2 basically envisions is that there will be 2 fire dispatch staff in Republic. And let's talk about that doomsday scenario. In any doomsday scenario, frankly, there's no best dispatch agency or backup agency or facility in the country that I am aware of that's going to be able to instantaneously have the same kind of performance as the primary dispatch agency. It's just not going to occur. But what's envisioned in scenario 2 is something like this, and this would all have to be hashed out in the transition plan. When you have your disaster occur, let's say the tornado that was suggested wipes out the primary dispatch facility. All right, those calls would get all calls would get transferred over to Republic. Those 2 fire dispatchers would then become fire dispatchers and call takers, and law enforcement dispatchers and call takers, and start doing triage. Overflow could occur at Christian County in that a particular event, but over the next 45 to 60 minutes, Springfield Greene dispatchers that didn't get wiped out in the Desire would start trickling in and would deploy in the basement of the Republic Police Department dispatch center. And that facility in the basement is probably 2/3 the size of this room. It needs, by the way, to be upgraded, as reflected in the report, to have redundant systems. But that's essentially what would occur. So you triage initially the calls, and within 45 to 60 minutes, hopefully, you would be fully deployed in the backup center in the basement of Republic to handle the rest of the disaster. That kind of response could not occur at Christian, as you were already talking. They'd be overflowed. They might be handling calls for 2, 3, 4 weeks, depending upon the nature of the disaster. So that's the scenario that we would envision in that doomsday type of event.
You were speaking about a doomsday event, and
you were saying that we needed redundancy in the Republic Police Department. In order to completely create a redundant system at the Republic Police Department, you will be spending $750,000 to $1 million in software, hardware, and all kinds of other stuff that come with those type of systems for disaster recovery options. Where are we going to find that kind of money?
Well, let's begin with the initial staff savings that you would derive from going to scenario 2. At $285,000 a year, your payback for those redundant systems is less than 3 years. You're bringing up an important issue, however, with regard to backup operations. Backup operations is a risk assessment for any agencies involved in dispatch operations. There are some agencies throughout the United States that say, you know what? The risk assessment, you use 99.9% of it not happening. It's probably even higher than that. Some dispatch entities say, you know what, we're not going to have it at the backup center. We'll take the risk. Or we'll just transfer it over to the county, nearby small county, and hope everything goes okay. Our position at Matrix Consulting Group is it's a best practice to have redundant systems, trained staff operating your backup center in case you have the tornado that wipes out the facility. It's a risk assessment, certainly. The chances are minimal. But do you want to take that chance? That's for every community to decide. That's for the commissioners to decide, the advisory board to decide, the city council to decide, based on behalf of what they believe their community wants. But you're absolutely right. There is a cost involved to develop a best-in-class backup center. Are you willing to incur that cost? That's certainly a question that needs to be addressed. But specifically with your $750,000, payback's less than 3 years at $285,000 staffing savings a year.
I really don't like when people just throw a number out and have it be unsubstantiated number. So whether it's $750,000, whether it's $250,000, that number I do not believe, unless you have some definite proof that that's what that cost is. You hate to throw those numbers out and give people an idea that that's what that cost would be.
Other questions? Comments?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and I guess you'd call it a compliment. I have read your report very carefully, and I want to compliment you on how you presented this report tonight, because what I read, I came to the same conclusion in terms of what that report said as to what you just said. And the reason I want to compliment you is that not many consultants pull that off. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. I'll tell my wife. She thinks I don't communicate very well, so.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's my understanding, Scenario 1, Scenario 2, with both scenarios, the Republic Police Department will not operate 24/7. I mean, it will not be open. They'll be in operation, but will not be open 24/7, and they will have to take prisoners into the Greene County Jail. Is that correct?
No, not under Scenario 2. In Scenario 2, well, with this caveat. In Scenario 2, the scenario is designed where you would deploy the Springfield Greene County fire dispatchers to the Republic dispatch centers. They would probably operate 2 consoles there on a 24/7 basis. All right? They would be located at that facility 24/7, those people. And what would need to be decided in that transition plan for Scenario 2 is what would those Springfield Greene County dispatchers do? They can certainly monitor, by example, the cameras for the jail and holding facility while doing fire dispatch. That's done throughout the country. There are some things that they're probably not going to do. But that would be decided in the transition plan. So essentially, you could, as you were suggesting, leave the police facility open 24/7 because you would have staff located at the police facility on a 24/7 basis.
So the detainees would still remain there? My concern is, if it is not open 24/7, what about criminal activity? In their mind, do they think they're going to be safer, and will criminal activity increase because they think that these officers may be tied up taking prisoners into the Greene County Jail? What about that one phone call that doesn't get answered timely because someone's being taken to the jail? What about that one person? What is that life worth? One person's life. That may be one incident in a million, but if I was that one in a million, I wouldn't want that to happen.
I agree with her. Obviously, I'm not in favor of the consolidation, so I'll defer back to you, sir.
Well, again, that just as we were talking earlier, it's a risk assessment. We do believe, and that's the reason for the recommendation for scenario 2, is that you should consolidate. So the chief and I are going to differ on that. But where the chief and I will agree is that there should be staff at the Republic Dispatch Center 24/7. They should be able to address many of the issues that would occur if you didn't have staff there at the location. So you're absolutely right. In the absence of staff at the Republic Police Department, that facility is going to be closed unless it's handled in some other way. One of the other ways it could be handled is the Republic will have to hire 5 community service officers that are there at the facility to monitor the cameras and do other type of administrative related tasks. But again, as we were talking, that's another risk assessment that every community has to go through. What kind of service do we want to provide? Do we want to keep our police department open on a 24/7 basis? We believe here in Republic you should, through the process that we suggested by implementing scenario 2.
In this outlook, was any consideration given to, and to kind of address your situation, maybe something I haven't heard come up, is the fact that the monies paying for these dispatchers are specifically Greene County monies, and it sounds to me like that a lot of the Greene County 911 monies is being used for special things at Republic which have nothing to do with 911. So to address your issue, the Republic Police Department would have to hire people out of their own budget to do those things if they needed that done, versus all the citizens of Greene County, paying for 911 services, which are actually being performed in the City of Republic. At Ebenezer, I don't have a 911 funded person at my office doing non-911 stuff. Makes sense?
I'm not sure about the sheriff or City of Springfield.
I would like to point out 2 things. One, on scenario 2, the 2 gentlemen up front are the ones affected. Chief Hall has all his dispatch calls now sent in Republic. Our chief has all his dispatch calls out of his own building sent to Springfield. So either way, these 2 gentlemen are the ones that are going to be most impacted, regardless of what we think. Sheriff Arnott's not going to be impacted. His are dispatched out of the same center. So, Chief Compton's not going to be impacted. He's going to be dispatched out of the same center. So the majority of calls, as far as fire, come right through here. Your department, Battlefield's department, have enough calls as well, but the majority of those fire calls are coming right there. So these 2 gentlemen are the ones that are impacted the most out of all this entire study on scenario 2. I just wanted to point that out because that's, I think, to your question, who's impacted by this the most? It's those 2 gentlemen.
Way before 8 o'clock. Any other questions?
I just want to clarify so everybody kind of knows, the Greene County Sheriff's Office has 270 employees, and we're not a 24-hour operation. We We lost that when we lost our dispatchers. Our dispatchers went to do dispatching and not answering the front door anymore. So we don't have that. And I can speak for the city of Springfield, too. Springfield Police Department does not have 24-hour lobby access. I think it's a great thing that Republic does have it. I think the issue that was brought up is who pays for it. Is it the money that comes out of 911 or something that the police department or Republic should pick up? And so I just want everybody to know kind of what the other entities, same way with Willard and Battlefield and everything, is in the same scenario that we are. Right. We both have separate record staff that do records functions that used to be combined with our dispatch.
Yeah, I can. I don't know if it's going to sway any opinions here, but remember in the presentation, let's be clear on one thing. Let's not get caught up in the definition of what a dispatcher is. A dispatcher is a specialist or a generalist. There are generalist dispatchers throughout the United States. They do more than just dispatch services, answering telephone calls, dispatch calls for service, dispatching calls, handling inquiries from law enforcement officials. In fact, if I were to do a count on this, I would suggest that there are probably more generalist dispatchers in the United States than there are specialist dispatchers in the United States. Now, that does not mean that issue that's being brought up isn't valid, because the concern is, well, wait a second, those dispatchers are going to be doing other things. Well, yes, but dispatchers do other things. Just because they don't do other things in Springfield Green because they're specialists does not mean that dispatchers don't do other things. They absolutely do. So it is our position that as part of the transition plan, if you move forward on scenario 2, you certainly have the ability to perform other duties and responsibilities when you're not doing dispatch. What those duties and responsibilities entail would certainly have to be decided as part of that transition plan. But we certainly believe in Matrix Consulting Group, whether you're a fire dispatcher, whether you're a police dispatcher, et cetera, you can certainly monitor a jail camera. As one particular duty, you can be present so the operation can be open on a 24/7 basis. So we don't think any of those things are out of line given the dispatcher job descriptions that are out there throughout the United States. Other questions? 7:28, 32 minutes. Go home and watch TV, or we can keep going, whatever you're like. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg, for that. As you guys can see, there's a lot of things to consider and look at as a result of this. He has given us the recommendation from Matrix Consulting, but obviously there are tons of questions that still have to be answered on how we do things and where it is that we go. So, I've heard many of those raised of things that probably are more related to a transition plan and how it is that we work through a transition, regardless of which way this ends up going as far as the final decision that's made. The advisory board will be receiving the final report, and then based upon that final report, they will take that under review and then make some final recommendations and obviously the plan of how we go forward. So there still will be a lot of time, obviously, for input and then looking through as, what are all the implications of everything that we do. So with that, I would say that the 911 Advisory Board will be adjourned.
And since David and I both have worked on this with Greg, I just want to add a couple of comments. Anyone that would like a copy of the draft report, please contact myself. You can contact David. We'll be happy to get you a copy of that report. We want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to read it. Greg went through 20 slides, as you can see, and that represents over 100 pages of information. And hours and hours upon time on a whole bunch of people's parts to get that information to Greg. There's a lot of very, very good information in there that I think people should read, just as Harold Bench, our county commissioner, has. It's awesome to read. And the other thing to remember, we are one county, and we have to recognize that we are unique. We've got a big city in Springfield. The next biggest city is the City of Republic at 14,751. We're a growing county. We have to recognize what is important to Springfield, what is important to Republic, what's important to Willard, Stratford, the Groves. There's a lot of other entities that are all part of this, and we can't say that the Springfield-Greene County way is the best way, or conversely, is the Republic way the best way. We have to find a way to blend what we both have, the best things that we both have, bring those two together, use our resources, and use them wisely. And I mean, personally, I was thrilled to death with the Scenario 2 decision. I think it's well thought out. It makes a lot of sense, and that's hopefully we can move together as a county and make the right decisions and do what's best for all of us. So that's my sales pitch, I guess. But bottom line is, if you need a report, come back and get it from us. Thank you.
We're adjourned.